Welcome back to Salon Success Secrets, the podcast where we raise up leaders who scale empires one guest experience at a time. And in today's episode, it's for every salon owner or director asking, how do I groom my next right hand without losing the soul of my salon? Because let's be clear, leadership isn't about giving somebody the keys and hoping that they figure it all out.
Yeah, it's about, leadership is truly about like transferring clarity, building beliefs, and documenting systems so the mission outlives you. Isn't that so powerful just to think about it? Like the mission outlives you. So, like, if you've ever thought, hey, she's great at her job, but I don't know if she's ready to lead others, or maybe it's, hey, why can't anyone just take initiative around here? Or maybe you even said, or worse, I'm the only one who can do it right. Then this episode is your wake up call. So let's talk about how to build leaders without babysitting and how to install systems that actually scale.
Mm, I love that. Systems that actually scale. Let's dive into step one, which is where you start to share the vision. And that is that clients come first and systems come next. Because let's start with the truth. The most important asset in any salon or business really in the world is the clients. It's not your chairs, it's not your teammates, it's not your color line. Even I think people sometimes get confused and think, man, if I had a rock star stylist with 100,000 followers on Instagram, that would be amazing. But no, clients are why we exist. And they're why we build systems. Because without systems to serve them, you're just hoping for a good day. And hoping isn't a strategy, because one thing that we know for sure is your next leader must know this, and that's that we protect the client experience at all costs, and the way that we protect it is with systems. But here's the trap that most salons fall into. They confuse intention with implementation. You know, because you can't just be like, yeah, I think that this is what's happening, and it's not actually happening. Because if the system isn't written down, if it's not recorded or documented in any way, you guys, it's not a system. It's merely a wish, and wishes don't scale.
Yeah. If you can watch this live, I'm shaking my head really big because this is really good. I was like, yes, wishes don't scale. So when
Mhm.
you think about this, step number two is going to be coaching your next leader starts with seeing the system. So great leaders don't just manage people, they fix broken systems. So your future salon leader should be a mirror, not a megaphone. Isn't that so interesting if you think about it? When something's off, maybe a client review drops off, rebooks fall off, or even the energy shifts, they don't default to blame. They get curious. Isn't that so good? Instead of defaulting to blame, they're going to ask things like, hey, where is the system breaking down? Or they might think like, what's unclear? Or maybe it's they ask, what needs to be role played, taught, or adjusted? Because their role isn't to criticize, it's to repair. Because in a team-based salon, we don't point fingers, we point people back to the system.
I love that. We don't point fingers, Jen. We point people back to the system. That's so huge in a team-based
Mhm,
salon.
mhm.
And I think this is where step three really does come into play. This is where you give feedback that builds, not breaks. Because let's talk about feedback, because this is where most new leaders crumble. They try to correct a teammate, but it comes off as controlling, cold, or even worse, condescending. And here's what we like to teach instead. Feedback is a team sport. You have to think that we are on the same side of the table. We're not across from each other. And this is Brene Brown calls this engaged feedback. It's when you stay in it together and you lead with love and not labels. So it would look like, instead of, you're not doing this right, you would try to say, hey, tell me what's been going on lately. Something feels off and I want to help, because that's not soft. That's strategic. That's leadership. Because when you're coming from a place of saying you're not doing this right, you're trying to make yourself the hero of the story. But truly, as a leader, you're trying to make the other person with you the hero of the story. And the way that you do that is to really uncover it in that conversation that we just talked about, it, doing it that way.
So good. It even gave me the ick when you said you're not doing this right. So when we go on to step 4, role play is the leadership superpower. So if you want your new leader to grow fast, teach them this one thing: role play everything. Let me say that again: role play everything. And after you role play it again, role play it again. So like this means everything: scripts, scenarios, conversations with guests, difficult follow-ups, every part of the sales process. Because here's the truth: you don't rise to the level of your potential, you fall to the level of your preparation. Like the salon leader who can say, hey, let's run through that checkout script together real quick, is a leader who builds confidence, not just critiques performance. The role play reveals where someone's stuck. Maybe it's not the offer, it's the tone, not the words, it's the timing. And once you isolate the breakdown, you can send them back to the right part of the system. And this is where you'll discover if your systems are tight or if they're playing the game of telephone with your legacy. This is when you think about the game of telephone, we probably all have played that game where you start with the phrase, and by the time it gets sometimes to the first person or even to the second or third person, it's a whole totally different phrase. And so that's the same thing when it comes to like answering your phone. Like if someone is answering your phone and everybody has a different script that they're using, that's a break in a system. And that's a great opportunity for a leader to step in, to first be aware of that. I think that's one of the first steps to transformation, is being aware of it, and then having those great conversations and role playing it with the person. Yesterday we had a new beauty pro who's in our co-stylist training program, and she was put up front to learn, and I walked up there and she was like, I'm really, really, really nervous. I don't know what's happening. And so like we did a few more role plays with her. They had already done some, and you could tell her whole energy shifted. She felt more confident. She felt seen. She felt like she could do it. Like we gave her the gift of confidence. And that's what a lot of times role playing does. And like by the end of the day, I was like, okay, girl, I see you up there. Yeah, you got it going on. So it's just like we forget the power of role playing because it comes natural to us, but it's not natural to everyone.
I love that, Jen. And it is just a beautiful thing when you see that shift in their energy and their transformation. And so helping new leaders to see, hey, we're trying to get a positive shift. We're not trying to change every single thing today. We're just trying to get that one next positive shift. So I love that. And step 5 really is like, hey, if you're feeling the cracks, it's time to dive into those systems. And guess what? We've got you. Because listen, if your stomach just dropped because you realized that your systems aren't written out, your leaders are winging it, and you're still the only one who knows how to fix things when they go wrong, that's not your fault. It's just the cost of staying too busy to build the right training foundation. But there's a solution. Text the word PRO, that's PRO, to 469 283 5590. And we'll send you over all the details on our brand new training program, $1 Million Beauty Pro. This is an on demand and live training system that turns, button pushers into brand builders. And it's built for you so that you can finally scale your team without watering down the vision. Just like Jen talked about telephone, you'll eliminate the telephone game forever, because you guys, we're not guessing anymore. We know the score. Team-based salons earn millions more. And it starts with leaders who don't just show up, but rise up. So whether you've got one stylist or you're eyeing for leadership, or you're trying to build a full blown management pipeline, remember, great leaders aren't born, they're developed inside of a system that actually works.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me just want to keep singing it. Team-based salons earn millions more.
Yeah,
Team-based salons earn millions more. It's
true.
so true. So true. So like Lindsay was saying, great leaders aren't born, they're developed inside a system
Mhm.
that works. And if yours isn't working, let's fix that. So we'll see you next time on the Salon Success Secrets podcast. Let's continue building this legacy together.